Hi, this is Max Gocher, and here with Mike Abernathy. And we're going to talk to you some today, go through broker's proposal. For those of you that haven't been following this series, in our weekly blog that we try to get out every Thursday, there have been 10 previous articles, blog posts on this very topic of transitioning into a practice, whether you're an existing doctor starting another practice or you're a younger doctor starting their first practice, and any and everything in between. So in about 33 years of doing this now, consulting with dentists all across the country, we've had the opportunity to look at dozens, maybe hundreds of these brokers' proposals. And they can be pretty interesting. So most dentists, only ever look at one from whatever broker that they happen to be dealing with for their typically one practice purchase, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're going to give you a year's worth of experience in looking at these and try to give you some idea of what to look for and what to pay special attention to, what to ignore, things like that. So Mike's going to share his screen here in a minute. He's going to show you some things from an actual brokerage proposal for an actual practice transaction that we've taken a look at. So
and let me remind you too that the series of articles was about buying an existing practice rather than a startup, a de novo, from scratch. And it was titled initially, kind of beginning with the end in mind. And the whole idea was to be able to take the average dentist and show them the most profitable, quickest way to double or quadruple your purchase in 12 to 24 months. And so to be able to do that, there were certain requirements in finding this type of practice. And so just as a reminder, as Max said, this is one of about 10 different topics leading up to this. And one was beginning with the end in mind, in search of the perfect dental practice. And again, keep in mind, we're looking for an existing practice, great location, and maybe it's not the best practice in town, kind of like a fixer-upper, where you buy the worst house on the best street and turn it into your forever house. Okay, so that's what we're looking at. But the whole purpose would be profitability and the ability to double it. And so we spent a lot of time talking about this. And so as we go through this brokerage package, I may skip over some things. So I've made some notes for you and for me. And I may or may not mention them. And so you'll need to kind of follow this in the video and look at it. But we go from this beginning to this, where we're actually looking at brokerage package. So we're staging this, where you find, what's going to be the perfect recipe, what professionals need to get together, what documents. And we talked about a growth analysis spreadsheet that we use for analyzing these. And I probably look at 2 or 3 of these a week. Doctors bringing them to me or asking me questions about it, and just help them navigate their way through it. So this is a real practice. I've taken out all the names, everything on there, where they're located. But again, based on those articles, you've gathered a bunch of information. This is going to be part of it. You've looked at the demographics, you've done your research, and these articles go through in detail of what to do. But we're coming into the final one, and I wanted to kind of couch this for you in that when you go to a brokerage, let's say you haven't found the practice by yourself, you're going to a brokerage and they've got practices for sale. You've given them the parameters about what you're looking for, and they present this package about the practice. Keep in mind that brokers are not your friends. Okay, they are there for the sale. They make a 10% commission. If there's real estate involved, and again, we discussed this in these articles, we'd love to buy the real estate too. They're going to get another 6% for that. So 16% of the total sale is going in their pocket. Their entire focus is on closing this deal. And so these brokerage packages tend to give you information, but not all of the information. And we have discussed that in previous articles, and I'll try to mention it as we go. Now, let me just tell you something about this practice. It happens to belong to a female doctor. She does a lot of her work is done with lasers. Kind of an artsy cosmetic type practice, and in a medium-sized town. So again, you need to read every review about this doctor, because when we're buying a practice, the goodwill, what transfers to you in a purchase, you're investing in their reputation, good or bad. And so let's run through this. And this profile is pretty much like you see in any dental practice or any brokerage package. But what's interesting, when we talk about the price they want to sell it for, they're required by law, these brokerages, these brokers are, to mention what fair market value means. And fair market value is defined as what a seller that had all of the data, complete understanding of the data, no compunction to sell, would sell it for, and what a buyer, again, with all the data, total understanding of the data, would buy it for if they didn't have to buy. So no matter what a broker tells you a practice is, what its value is, they just pull this out of their tuition. There is no way to establish true value. They're giving you the price they want to sell it for. And we're going to talk about the difference between value and price here. So read all the reviews about the doctor and the practice. Let's say you don't have any reviews. That's not great, but it's better than just nothing but bad reviews, right? Okay. If I had gotten this down to the very last practice and we were just almost sure we're going to buy this, then I would run a background check on the doctor. Now, in these brokerage packages, you're going to end up with tax returns, P&L statements. It's easy for you to spend $70 and go online and run a background check on this doctor, both in the state board and the civil and criminal background check. I mean, you just need to know what's going on when you do this. Okay. Address. Now, not just demographics, but where this is located. Is this someplace you are willing to live? Because my suggestion is, if you're not willing to live there, don't buy it. There's a huge difference in running a practice and being part of a community as opposed to buying it and living 30 miles away in a gated community and driving back and forth. It just won't grow. It just won't work. Not at double or quadruple what you paid for it in 12 to 24 months. That's our goal. Okay. So we're going to look up the demographics, and we wrote an entire article just about demographics. And so you'll need to go back and read that. But in this particular case, it's very average. 41,000 income, about 25,000 people in the zip code, average education. The only thing that wasn't average is that the competition was about one dentist for every 900 people, which isn't good. We want 1,000 to 2,000 at least. Now, if you want to get more information about the demographics, you can call a list broker, L-I-S-T, broker, and buy that data and look at 5 miles around your practice rather than just in the ones that code. Now, this particular doctor, years and location, been there 26 years. In business 26 years. Been there a long time. 1,900 square feet. Max and I produced a little yellow card about 30 or 40 years ago that had important key things about a dental practice. One was about 325 square feet per op. Now, that's not 325 square feet in an operatory, but if you wanted, let's say, 10 ops, then just multiply 10 times 325 square feet, and you need around 3,200 square feet. Now, if we're looking at this office size, 1,900 square feet, if we divided 300 to 400 square feet in that, you can tell that there's going to be about 5 ops. Number of ops is important. And again, you'll find they list this in just a second.
One thing I might add, Mike, is you look at there, she's 26 years in this same location. The demographics are likely to be totally different today than they were 26 years ago
Right.
when she started this practice. I know in the area where I live, the biggest grocery store close to us in a little shopping center 20 years ago, when we moved into this area, that center was full and booming, lots of traffic, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now it's about
Yeah.
30% leased and about 70% empty.
Yeah. And again, we've said that if you've been in the same location 10 to 15 years, you're probably not in the right location if you want to continue to grow.
Yeah.
And again, at least it's not in a professional building. I mean, it's possibly the worst possible place. You're on the second story, third story of a professional building. You have no natural marketing. It's not going to work well. And so we're real particular, and we've kind of built up to this video. And so we're leaving a lot of stuff out. We built up the point where you should know exactly what we're looking for here. And we're just trying to see, how do you decipher the data that a broker gives you to see if that's pretty close. You're never going to have a perfect transition, never going to find a perfect office. But I would say with this strategy of being able to double or quadruple it in the first 12 to 24 months, you're going to need to turn down 10 to 15 of these that you look at. They're harder to find looking at it the way we're looking at it. Okay. Now, monthly lease. In this particular case, this doctor owns the building. But if this doctor had not owned the building, I would want to know. Now it's a triple net lease. What is the term of the lease? When's it going to be over? If I were buying a practice and they were leasing, and the lease is going to be up in a year and a half, or 6 months, I would make any offer contingent on the satisfactory negotiation of a new lease. 50% of the value of your practice is going to be tied up in the leasehold improvements. Okay? I mean, generally it costs $120, $150 a square foot. In this case, she's got about 2,000 square feet. So that's $250,000, $300,000 in leasehold improvements that you'd want to know if you were going to lease it, that one, the lease won't go up, that two, the lease is assignable. In other words, she could be leasing it, and she's, oh yeah, it's assignable, and you buy the practice and find out it's not assignable. The landlord can charge you whatever they want to charge you. Or are there any other lease costs involved, like maintenance, electricity, whatever? Because what we're going to do is we're going to take and lay out the numbers. You can afford a certain type of practice at a certain price, and you know that before you've gotten to this point. Okay, but there are additional costs, and I'll mention those as we go through here. Now, 4 ops equipped. If this were an office that only had 4 ops, I would say absolutely do not buy it. Because if you're going to double or quadruple it, you will outgrow this practice in a matter of 4 to 5 months. And then we have a capacity blockage where the growth stops. We had a doctor in Las Vegas that bought a practice that had 4 or 5 ops. He outgrew it in 6 months. And he had hired us to help coach him, and he'd already doubled the practice. We literally went less than 3 miles down the road and bought a building that let him up it to 8 or 10 ops. And he goes, well, I can't get out of my lease. I said, that's fine. The lease is $5,000. You will literally increase your production by $60,000 to $80,000 a month by moving. And as it turned out, the landlord approached him a couple of months afterwards and offered to let him out of the lease. We said no. He offered to pay the young doctor back all the lease that he paid up to that point, because he had a new lessor that was going to pay more. It's going to sign a 10-year contract, blah, blah. So again, we're trying to make you an educated consumer, and success is in the details here. So 5 ops, what kind of equipment? And it doesn't have to be brand spanking new. The patients don't understand. It just needs to be usable. But in the process of looking at this, the seller will have to give you a bank package with list of equipment, serial numbers for your bank to say yes or no on the loan. Because they're constantly looking at the numbers. Will the buyer, you, be able to service that debt. And what are they paying for? Okay. Now, software, Dentrix. We've already talked about this, but one of the things you're going to want to get from them, it's not offered in the initial brokerage package. And you'll see everything that's offered here is there to support the price they want to charge. There isn't enough data here for you to understand, is there value after the sale for me to increase the production? Okay. Operatories for ops, not many, not enough. Software, I would want to know if it was Dentrix, I would want to see their practice statistics report, which gives you the number of patients by age, number of patients by zip code, male to female, insurance, no insurance, active patients, the number of active patients that don't currently have an appointment, which would let you see a lot of the demographics of the practice. Let's say the average age there was 55, but the average age of the 5-mile radius around you, average age was 32, but she didn't have anybody that age. That might be an upside for you or a real negative. Okay. So software, we want to know about that. Now, she's got a CBCT. Now, I want to know software's age. Generally, new technology, it gets eclipsed about every 18 months, sometimes even sooner. And so you'll find that CAD/CAM generated crowns, E4D, CIRAC, CBCTs, oftentimes, once they're 3 or 4 years out, you can't even upgrade the software or the hardware. So sometimes you look at, oh, great, she's got a CBCT, but you've never done an implant and it's an old one that's 5 or 6 years old. It may not be worth anything to you. Okay, charts are electronic. I can't tell you all the times that I see doctors that have, EagleSoft or SoftDent, but they don't even use their software. They still have charts and they maybe use the scheduler, but not everything. So it makes it very hard to verify anything. Now, office hours. Now, again, it's very common to see average office hours being 8 to 5, Monday through Thursday. But which this is. Now, on one side of it, as a consultant and a mentor to doctors, we know those are not very good hours. There's not, enough 7 to 9 and 3 to 5 or 6 and Saturdays and Fridays, consumer hours, peak demand times in the schedule. But from our purpose, buying a practice that we're going to double or quadruple, sometimes a bad schedule is great for us. Because if they are not open on Fridays, they're not open, let's say, Saturday mornings, or they don't see kids, or they don't do their endo, they don't do implants, or they don't do oral surgery. Those are all upsides for us. The negative here is going to be when we look at the staff and the fact that she's been there, 26 years, we're going to find her team has been there a long time. So while this schedule has a huge upside, it may be a huge challenge to get an existing staff to stay and work a better schedule. Now, I don't mean more hours. It'll still be 32 hours, but just better hours that make it easier to market. Now, I'm going to slide down. Now, I purposely, you notice that's blank. I've purposely taken out anything that would allude to who this is. Okay, so I'm sorry I've taken that out, but I just can't share that. So here's the team. Okay, hygienist, full-time. Front desk, full-time. Assistant works 3 days, and where I've underlined it, she's paid for a 4-day work week. She's not going to change hours, no matter what you pay her. She's not going to work more hours.
And
you have to replace her.
And after being there 30 years, she may just decide, I've had enough. I don't need a new doctor to train up, right? From her perspective.
Yeah. I'm not going to breastfeed another doctor.
Yeah.
And to the point that I like the way that it's all set up. And again, the other thing too, is you've got an older, this is a female doctor. Okay. But let's say it was a male doctor, then I've oftentimes seen that one of the front desk or the only front desk is their wife. You want to know that, because in all likelihood, she's going to be gone. I mean, if you look at buying a practice, most likely there's some real important people. I'm not saying really good people, real important people that you may need to keep on so that we keep as many patients as possible. Now, this is going to come out not the way I intended. Okay, it's not a sexist statement. But if I were a male, there would be a real red flag for me buying a female's practice. Now, I often find that female doctors are better than male doctors. They may have more patients. But what I really find is a lot of female patients go to a female doctor because they want a female doctor. They don't want a male doctor. And so if I were to buy it, and again, we're paying for goodwill here, then there's a greater than average chance that you will lose more patients in the transition, not because you weren't as good or as nice, but just because they prefer a female doctor. That come out horrible, Max? Or
No, but then I think you also need to consider that this is principally a cosmetic practice.
it is.
So that would be an interesting thing to look at in here is what is the mix between male and female patients? It could easily be 60, 70% female or more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
And that report in Dentrix would give that to you.
Yeah.
If it were EagleSoft, it would be your patient analysis report. You can't get that report in Open Dental, but you can look up the patients by zip code, patients by age, male, female, insurance, no insurance, active. You can look at it's just not in a single report. But let's say this is kind of, we gotten down, we're really excited about this. The trouble is you can't fall in love with this until you get all the data, because it creates a halo effect and you start overlooking things that most people would go, oh, that's not good. Like this 3-day work week for this assistant that maybe she's the glue that holds the whole practice together. Now, following this, they had the staff profile, they have a doctor profile. So I took all that out. But again, she was an author, a lecturer, a teacher in a dental school, has that spa-like deal, really big into lasers. Really seems like a very intelligent person, but her practice is very average. And we're looking for average or below average practices. That's why I chose this one. It's just kind of average. You look at the cost of hygiene, an average currently. But I also, and we talked about this in other articles, where I would want to know what percentage of their collections in hygiene are represented in their hourly pay. So if you're paid, let's say $40 a day or 8 hours or $320 plus taxes and any benefits, so say it was $350, I'd want to know that percentage was somewhere between 30 and maybe 34%. So I want to know what that $38 an hour means. What percentage is coming in from hygiene? What type of work are they doing? Scaling root planes. Again, as we go down here, you'll see that she has very few new patients. Doesn't market at all. So again, scale on down here. More honorary fellowships. Really smart person. Talks about her pets, her hobbies. It's that kind of a practice. Okay. So new patients per month, 5 to 10. Now, the average score is going to be 20 to 30. Now, that's somebody that doesn't bathe, barely unlocks the front door, and actually shows up, answers the phone occasionally. Should get at least 20. So I've got to think, if I'm looking at a practice that only has 5 to 10, one, it could be maybe the competition is horrible. They're really tough. There's a doctor on every corner. Maybe she just limited her patients to people that just want, implants on the upper right side of their face, and that's it. She just niched it down to something that, but again, if the competition was normal and she wasn't seeing kids or she wasn't doing some of the things I could do, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's also interesting too, when you're looking at this, it shows down here breakdown of it's 100% fee for service. Is that good or bad? It could be both. Could be really bad. Because if she's been there 26 years and she's only gets 5 new patients a month, again, believe me, it'll be, when they say 5 to 10 new patients a month, I guarantee you, when you look this up, it'll have 10 months of 5 new patients, and there'll be 1 month that has 10. I mean, you can say, well, it's 5 to 10. Okay. But again, this patient seen annually, 2,200, we want to see her schedule, because based on the number of new patients, and she's a cosmetic dentist. I mean, a cosmetic dentist, they fix it, they try to fix everything, and so they're not getting much out of the recall. And so I'll bet you $1 million that 2,200 patients seen annually is not true.
Maybe the only way it could be true is if that's the number of patient visits, not the number of patients. Or, that could be every patient she's seen in the last 26 years. I mean, this is something you've got to really check out.
I mean, this is, and it's because you're going to look at this real quickly. If you've already decided that you like, let's say you really love the building, and the location is right where you want to live, you'll go through here and go, you just skip over these things, but you're not going to be able to double or quadruple this practice in 12 to 24 months. It's an extremely low number of new patients, and it is always, 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 there's a reason for that. What was the reason? Okay. It's 100% fee for service. Okay. I looked up the penetration of insurance in this area. It was 78% of the patients outside of her practice have dental insurance. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a fee for service practice, but we've already proven that you're only going to get 5 to 10 new patients a month. If you bought this at the price they want to sell it for, and it was $600,000 for the practice, if you wanted to buy this for the price they wanted to sell it for, sometimes the numbers won't work. And keep in mind, she's brainwashed everybody in town that she doesn't accept insurance or she's not a network. That's hard to change that without really spending maybe $50,000 in the first 6 to 8 months marketing the fact. You're trying to double it, you're going to be insured, marketing the fact that you're back in network. So you're fighting against a current that's already there. You're standing in the river. Okay, I've decided to buy this. You step in the river. It's moving you in the direction the practice was always moving. And so you're constantly swimming against a 5 to 10 new patient a month practice. Okay. And there's going to be money you have to put in the practice to counteract that current. So again, I tend to think for the average dentist, a fee-for-service practice is a very bad thing to consider. I feel like in successful fee-for-service practices, oftentimes it's driven by the charisma of the staff, team, and culture, by the location, and by the clinical excellence of that doctor. Given that, the average dentist stepping in there could not reproduce that and will not be able to, make that work. Okay. Now, keep in mind, let's say we're looking at a practice and 20% of their income comes from ortho, doing 6-month smiles, which is great. I think you should be doing that in fast braces in Invisalign. But let's say you didn't want to do it, you couldn't do it, and you're not going to do it, and you're going to offer to buy this practice. You need to keep in mind that if whatever percentage comes from that one service that you will not or can't do needs to be subtracted from what you're going to offer, because you walk into this and not cover that 20% as an example, the numbers won't work. Okay. So keep that in mind. Now, we know for a fact, because I read her profile and I know the practice, that a majority of what she does comes out of laser. Now, you'll notice that when you look at top procedures, there's nothing that says laser. Consequently, the first one, where it says restorative, is where they put it. And you'll notice that because this is a template for this broker, they've never had a restorative go over 40%. Okay, so I know this is subtle, but if you're not in love with this, you know, how she makes money, then how are you going to compensate for that? Okay, now this actually is pretty good. Production by provider for 2021 to 22. Okay, so around 750 total. But now you notice it says production. Okay, circle that. It didn't say collection. It didn't say net adjusted production. It could be gross production. Okay. But you see these numbers and you add it up, you're going, it in no way says that they collected that much money. But normally it's great if your hygiene does a third. But in this case, when you look at her schedule, she sees one or two patients a day.
Yeah. And, you know, when I look at this, because I'm sort of a math geek, I look at that $361,000 for hygiene. If I remember from the list back up the page, she has 2 hygienists.
Yeah.
She's open 4 days a week.
Yeah.
You do the math on that, the hygiene production is about $900 per hygienist per day.
It's still a low production number.
Not very good in a fee-for-service practice where they're not in network. You know, now I see practices all the time where that's what they're producing because they're writing off 50 or 60% on hygiene procedures.
Right.
But purportedly, they're not writing off anything here. So it's really low.
You keep in mind, too, that with the low number of new patients, I mean, in an average practice, they have 20 to 30, but in an average practice, they only have 1 hygienist. So to grow a practice, you need more to 20 or 30 new patients a month per hygienist. So in a 2 hygiene practice, you'd need about 60 new patients or more for them to be productive on a daily basis, not as a percentage. And so what brokers do, they tend to take numbers and put them in a format that supports their valuation of the practice. Okay, I'm gonna slide through this because I've summarized it for you. Everybody knows what a profit and loss statement is. And just to remind you, there's an article on kind of demystifying the growth analysis spreadsheet, but also the profit and loss statement. And so what we do is we divide this into 7 categories, the 7th being anything the doctor takes. The rest of it would either go to compensation for team members, you know, employment stuff, facility, dental supplies, office supplies, marketing, and what I left out.
Lab.
Okay. Now, it was interesting, and I'm going to just slide by this to show you the summary. But just remember that every line item here can be put under, like, for example, uniforms. You know, $400, that would be put under what it costs for your employees. And again, she does a pretty good job doing this, but again, as a percentage of what she's taking in, these numbers are not good. Okay. Now, the practice is offered at $660,000. Okay. In 2000, let me go back here. I'm just kind of curious here. $735,000 in 2021. Okay. Because I'm going to refer to this as a percentage here in just a second. Okay. Practice is offered at $660,000. Okay. This is 89.7% of the last 12 months collections. That is approximately what a DSO, and a DSO wouldn't want this practice, but they might offer 90%. An average individual buyer is not going to offer over 70 to 75% of the last 12 months collections. And they want, okay, and they do this real subtly, okay? It says indicated just right above the 740 in the first column, indicated value of goodwill. Now, you know, when you buy this practice, because we've talked about this before, that let's say we're buying $1 million, you're going to pay $1 million for practice. We've got to take $1 million and allocate that $1 million into one of four categories. One is goodwill, two is supplies and equipment, number three is a non-compete, number four is accounts receivable, assuming the accounts receivable gets sold. So the buyer and the seller have individual things driving them. The seller wants as much in goodwill because it's taxed at capital gains, or about 20%. The buyer wants as much in supplies and equipment because they can depreciate that off. So you could have two practices selling for $1 million. One practice could have, let's say, let's just round it up so I can do this in my head, 90% goodwill. Then of that $1,900,000, she's going to pay 20% tax, or $180,000 on that portion. If another practice $1 million and the goodwill was 70%, then they're going to pay taxes on that $700,000, or about $140,000. What's left over? Anything left over other than goodwill, they pay at ordinary income, which could be as high as 39%. Big difference. And so even though you negotiate the price of the practice, we need to renegotiate, start all over in the allocation. In this case, it is a grossly unfair allocation of goodwill. And you notice they didn't say allocation of sale is this. Oftentimes you don't see it, but they snuck it in there. Indicated value of goodwill. Indicated as if there was some scientific formula. They just made this up. They just decided they wanted 90% goodwill. This is a real big red flag in a practice that does $61,000 a month and has no new patients. Because for me, if there isn't the demand and validity and goodwill of having people flocking to the practice, then why am I paying so much in goodwill? Okay. In this practice, you're going to be paying for little or no goodwill and basically a real nice building. Okay. Now, one other thing to remember when you're looking at these numbers, what is 1% of this practice worth? Because as I slide up here, we're going to look at the P&L summaries. And I want you to remember this. They collected $735,400 and something dollars. So 1% of collections in 2021. And you will notice that as we're doing this, we're in 2023, and the broker did not include the last year or year to date this year. There's a reason for that. And of course, you're going to ask for it, but you're going to see some aberration where the year they gave you was the best year ever, and the next years aren't quite as good. So again, it sounds like they're giving you data, but it's data support their argument. Okay, so $61,000 a year is just kind of average. I mean, and 1% is 7,350. That means if she only collected 94%, and it was fee for service, then 4 times that, or about $30,000, is money she left on the table. And if we looked at their aged accounts receivable and saw that to be the case, then we know the staff thinks they're doing everything great. But we're looking at it and going, we need to make some changes. Will that alienate the staff? So here's what I did. I took all of those topics, and I say I left one out, the marketing. I left it out because it was 0, I guess. I meant to put it in there, but it was 0. Okay. But compensation for team was 53.7%. It should be somewhere between, let's say, 25 to maybe 28, 29%. Really high. Facility cost, 11.5. Now, she owns the building. The rent was it $3,000 a month? It wasn't much. And it still ate up 11.5%, where the average, I mean, a good average would be more like 7 to maybe 9%. Dental supplies should be 6%. But you remember up there, she has a CIRAC, and their lab is only 0.1%. If they didn't have a CIRAC, I'd go, oh, she's not doing any crown and bridge. She's doing nothing but laser stuff. Okay, so there's a problem there. But in this case, probably what she's doing is she's lumped all of the supplies and costs for the CEREC under dental supplies. If we were to break that out, it would add something to her lab. But normally labs should be 8 to 10%, dental supplies should be 6% or less. Now, let's talk real numbers here, because I see doctors going out looking at a practice to buy. And I've asked young doctors, they'll call me and say, hey, Mike, I'm looking at this practice. And they show me all the numbers. And I say, so how much do you qualify for? He said, what do you mean? I said, how much will the bank loan you on a purchase? I go, well, I don't know. I mean, would you go out and look for a house if you didn't know approximately what you'd qualify for in a house? I mean, would you be looking at $1 million houses if you could qualify for 300? That was it? No. I see doctors get to this point, and obviously the numbers won't work, and they're clueless what the bank will. Okay, so I went ahead and ran the numbers as if we paid $660,000 for the practice. Okay, because remember, the seller does not have that debt of $660,000 for 10 years. So I use the current interest rate for a loan. So 10 years, 5.5%. That would mean around $7,000 a month or $86,000 a year. Or if you did what they did, same production level, average doctor, an increase of almost 12% in overhead in a practice that already has a really not good overhead. Can you see how the bank wouldn't loan on this? In fact, based on the numbers they gave us, this practice is worth no more than $450,000, maybe close to $500,000. And it still would be iffy, because again, if you're a male buying a female practice, the fact that there's a real high, or the competition level very high, real low doctor to patient ratio. Okay. Now, this is always interesting. Okay, practice earnings. I love it when they do such this nice thing for you guys. Figure out exactly what you're going to make at the next year. Now, I wish I could have marked this up, but again, I wanted you to see it before I did. Now, they do it out to 5th year when you're doing $1 million almost. Let's just look in the 1st year. The previous doctor was doing $100,000 less than this doctor that buys the practice in the 1st year, increases everything by $100,000. And I want to show you how they do this funny math. Okay, so total operating expenses, they fudged on that. Less cash, working capital, less depreciation, loan amortization. They actually did this right. Okay, about $84,000 a year. Cash available before taxes. You hear that, before taxes? $211,000. But if you did what she did, that would be $100,000 less than that 211. Does that make sense? It would be $111,000 before taxes, and then your taxes would be 30-something%. So you'd live on about half what you could do as an associate. Okay, so projected 1st year income of $295 minus debt was $211. Okay, you saw that. That's only based on an increase in production, collectible production, of $100,000. You notice when they discussed production, it was only production. When they talk about this, they're talking about dollars revenue. That's money collected. You'd have to do $100,000 more than they were doing in production to do this. So we're going to look for their tax returns. We're going to ask all these other things. But again, do you see how this could slip under the radar, and you might think this is closer to being a good deal than it is? Because that is a huge if. Okay. Now, if we add in the loan amount and everything, again, it just doesn't make sense. This is not even an average practice when it comes to new patients. It's not an average practice in the doctor's production. The real estate was really nice, had nice pictures. The price was reasonable, but the practice is not worth that. Now, I will say this, if you're buying real estate, and we discussed this before in the articles. Let's say we have real estate and we've got the practice cost. there are ways to manipulate the prices. So maybe you pay more for the real estate than you pay for the practice. And you might be able to show the doctor that's selling that even at a reduced price, they can put more money in their pocket after taxes by working with a CPA to take a number and allocate it a little differently. It'll be perfect for both of you. Okay. Now, I've already said the broker's not your friend. Okay. Their primary concern is commission. But I wanted to go over some numbers here and then we'll stop. Okay. This practice, if we're doing kind of a score sheet, we'll have gotten that growth analysis. We've looked at the demographics. That's either good or bad or a wash. We've looked at their P&Ls. We know if it's high overhead, who can we keep, and they told, in every case I've ever talked to a selling doctor or a buying doctor or a broker, the doctors never tell their staff that they're getting ready to sell their practice. So you really don't know what you're buying. Okay. So this had a high overhead, below average take home for the doctor who had no debts. Okay. Wasn't paying any bank loans. And again, so that's kind of negative. Competition area was 1,900. Now, it is a very narrow range of services and patient ages. So that's a plus for you. Okay, because you could fill that in and see kids and see teenagers and not have to do laser, have to do some cosmetic case. You could actually build up your hygiene and stuff by marketing. So again, competition. That's almost something I'll never try to counteract. If it's less than 1 to 1,700, I wouldn't even consider it. I'd much rather it be over 1 to 2,000. But again, find that out early in your discovery because you're crazy to walk in. You're not going to be the one person that can pull this off. Okay. Average score hours. Okay. It's possibly an upside because they're not consumer hours. And that could change the number of new patients. But it's probably a downside if we're looking at older staff. You notice back here, 25 years, 18 years, 15 years have been working. They're not going to be flexible at changing the hours. So again, if you start making changes, you have to make a bunch of them, then you're going to lose the team and they're going to tell everybody they know not to go there. And they'll probably end up in another practice down the street that doesn't care. And you will waste your money and you're not going to be able to double or quadruple this. Okay. Aging staff, large production from lasers. That's negative. Very low number of new patients, but they spent zero on marketing. Okay. Again, what are you going to market in an area that's almost 80% insurance driven if you're out of network? Lasers, I guess, so staff cost. Okay. Now we have a tendency, move that. Okay. We tend to look at the production per employee, production per op. It is not bad. It's around 15,000, better than average for 4 people, but not much better than average. We usually say about 13 to 14,000, but ideal would be 20 to 25. But in the practices we're looking to buy, I've seen the production per employee at 7 to 8,000. Okay, they're not productive at all. It may be because they don't have new patients. But if you follow the articles, we'll have built, by the time we look at this, we'll have built such a strong argument for certain things we have to have. And in this case, we don't necessarily need a real high production per employee or per op, but because we only have 4 ops, we do have the option of 1 more op. We might can make that work. I didn't see the floor plan of the office. I saw photographs of it. We may be able to get even more than just 1 more op out of the facility if everything else worked out well. But so far it hasn't. Okay. Low production per op, low production per employee. Okay. Female doctor, that's that possible downside. And again, there are quite a few potential upsides and downsides in a purchase. And we kind of mentioned some of those without listing them. But I think if you'll take the time, and I don't know how we can do this, Max, but when we post this video, if there was a way that they could access those articles. Like if this were the first thing they saw, or, and so they haven't read the articles, or maybe someone's followed the articles and they're going, yeah, I need to go back and reread those. And, as they go through a profile that a broker gets them, so they'll know what to ask for. Because again, on those upsides and downsides, what we've done, the last article that we wrote was about asking questions to fill in the blanks. Those are the questions that really help you determine the value. And remember, there's a difference between value and price. Okay? Price is what they want you to pay. Value is what you're willing to pay for. And again, that value may be so great that no matter what the price is, you need to buy it right now, because we've seen them like that. Even at a higher price, this has great value. But in this practice, there's little or no value in the wrong location, and it wouldn't be a good buy. Anything else, Max?
Just a couple of things that come to mind. Some of the things that we've seen, it's not at all uncommon for these brokers to take a percentage from the buyer and the seller.
Yeah.
And it's always kind of puzzled me how somebody can be, I don't know the right word I'm looking for here, but how can they be fair?
Criminal?
Huh?
Fraudulent, criminal.
Well, that's
my family.
See how they can fairly, say they're representing both sides in the transaction, because ultimately they're more interested in the seller than the buyer.
Yeah, well, and two, now, again, I was the first male in my family not to be an attorney. I mean, brother's attorney, my daughter's attorney, everybody's an attorney in my family. Dual representation is what he's talking about, where they represent both sides in a transaction. Is considered by legitimate attorneys with integrity. I know those names don't normally go to attorney, but they consider that to be at best unethical and probably illegal. Because again, if you're hiring an attorney to represent you, you want your focus being on protecting you, not on that commission or just getting consensus. So I get I get the deal done.
Yeah. And the other thing, that kind of really comes to mind quickly is that many of these brokers are going to try to rush you through this process. They're going to tell you, we got 2 offers already. We got 3 more doctors interested, and just, don't let that phase you. Like Mike said, do your research, ask the questions, look at the downsides, look at the upsides, and, make a good decision here, because this is something that, you're going to have probably a 10-year note on, maybe more. You're probably going to have to spend some more money on fixing it up, because a lot of practices, somebody's been there 26 years, maybe they haven't, maybe they hadn't replaced the carpet in 12 years, or, maybe it needs to be painted. The parking lot might need to be striped. Maybe the equipment is all limping along. Now, that's probably not true in this practice, because it was a cosmetic practice, and typically those doctors take really good care of it.
Well, you're going to have to buy the dental software.
Yeah, you're going to have to. Yeah.
And, the software doesn't go with the practice. Certainly the data does. But if you want a Dentrix, you're going to have to either lease or buy or whatever. It has to be changed to your name. You can't use that. Yeah. And I see doctors not factoring in $9,000 or $10,000 to do that, or the marketing in a practice. So we looked at the P&L and marketing was 0. Well, it should be 3 to 5%. If you're going to turn the practice down, it may be a dollar amount more. Okay, and so we've got to add that. The note increased the overhead by 10 or 12%, and then the cost of marketing might increase 4 or 5%, and then the fixing up facility cost in the first year might bump it up 1 or 2%, and then all of a sudden you realize that in a practice that has an overhead in the 75 or 80% range, a bank will not loan on that because the price is too high to support value in the sale, and it's unlikely that you'll be able to service that debt. The other thing I see brokers do, and this is real frustrating for me. I was looking at a practice in Alpine, Texas, and brokers will not want you to talk to the doctor. If you're the buyer, they don't want you to talk to the doctor. They want you to, in writing, to request certain data, and they'll give that to the doctor, and then they'll get back to you, which is one way to not talk sense into the selling doctor about and coming to a price they're willing to sell it for and a price you're willing to pay for it. They, hold you, kidnap you, hold you ransom, and put you out of touch with the one person that can make these decisions and ask the questions. So keep in mind that there is a disclaimer on the front of every brokerage package. It states that, now I won't use the legal words, I'll tell you what it actually says. We have no freaking idea if these numbers are real. They were given to us by the seller. We're presenting them to you. Our valuation of the practice has no merit at all. We have no idea, but this is what we want to sell it for. And we pulled this out of our tush. And so if you don't like this, we didn't do anything wrong. And you're going to hold us harmless if you buy it and find out that these weren't real numbers. And oftentimes they've been misrepresented, maybe not by the seller so much as just the ignorance of the seller. I mean, they didn't lie to you. They just told you something they thought was true.
Yeah, I would tend to say that the historical numbers are probably not too much of a fantasy, but the projection numbers are nearly always a fantasy.
Well, if they're using software to data mine and they don't not delete patients, but like they haven't been in 3 years, but
right.
they're active. I mean, if they don't understand their software and you run a report, it seems way out and left field. I mean, if it said they had 3,000 active patients and you had 2 hygienists, there's no more than 1,200, about 600 per hygienist that could actually be active that went through hygiene. And so, again, they're not lying to you, but if they can find data that supports the price, it tends to show up on this initial brokerage offering and in no way gives you the numbers you need to really value the practice. This practice in Alpine, they gave me numbers for 21. And then I said, I need the numbers for 22 and 23. And in the middle of 22, she had to go through cancer surgery and hadn't worked in 4 or 5 months. And consequently, her practice was worth, her production was maybe 20% of what it was in 21. They didn't offer that up front. So, again, I was trying to help a young doctor who was excited about the practice. So again, this is, you don't have to be super intelligent. You have to be super diligent. You don't have to understand every bit of it. You need to cover these topics. You can't leave things out. That's why we're suggesting you go back, take this video, and go back and track down these articles and put it together and then rewatch the video and see how it gives you a different depth of understanding.
Yep. And as always, if you have any questions, just let us know. And, we'd hope to keep this under an hour. I think we're right at about an hour. So we'll sign off here, and thanks for watching and listening.
Thanks.